Hello, everyone. Great to see all of you here for today's session. I'm Arya Sunish from the ML Industry Program at Cohere Labs Open Science Community. Today's session focuses on the move from academic research to applied machine learning. And we have this engaging talk lined up with Gaurav Gaonkar, machine learning engineer at Arki. Now, Gaurav comes with a unique mix of experiences. He worked on cognitive science and computer vision research at Brown University. He then moved into industry where he builds large-scale personalization and recommendation systems in AdTech. His work spans diffusion model research, feature engineering, distributed model training, and fast-moving ML pipelines. In this session, Gaurav will talk about what it takes to move to academic research to applied machine learning. He'll share how ideas from cognitive science shape the way he thinks about models, how he balanced long research cycles with fast product timelines, and what lessons stayed with him across both environments. He'll also walk through the habits and decisions that helped him grow as an ML engineer. The session will be super interactive, so don't hesitate to speak up and feel free to turn your cameras on as well. With that, I'm glad to welcome Gaurav to the session. The stage is yours, Gaurav, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I hope you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, Arya, for this really nice and warm introduction. I would also like to thank Cohere community for organizing this talk and all the attendees for attending this presentation. I hope everyone takes some good lessons from it. I have a lot to cover in the next 45 minutes. So without waiting further, let's get started. So academia and industry have always felt like two separate paths, but it turns out the most valuable lessons came from learning to move between them. And that's what I'm here to share today. I'm Gaurav. I currently work as a machine learning engineer in the industry at Arki and have 3 years of academic research experience. And I'll uncover my learnings from both academia and industry as we go through this presentation. A bit about my background. I wanted to introduce, I know Arya has done a really good job, but still a bit about my background here. I completed my master's in computer science at Brown. And throughout my master's, I was working as a computer vision and visual perception graduate researcher at Surrey Lab. Here in this lab, I was able to contribute into meaningful research projects that led to publications in ICLR 2025. And currently, one of my applied project is in the documentation stage for Nature Journal submission. During my time at Brown, I got an opportunity to work as a machine learning engineer intern in the industry in the summer of 2024. And later, post-Brown, I joined Arki as a full-time machine learning engineer in their core ML team. Now that you know a bit about my background, I would like to mention the agenda for today's talk. First, I will be going through the research in academia, and I'll be sharing my learnings that I've gathered in my academic journey. Further, I'll be sharing what practices in research helped me to crack a role as an MLE in the industry. This will be really helpful for the folks who want to pursue their career in this field. Later in this talk, I'll be talking about research and industry and my perspectives about it. Finally, I'll conclude the presentation by comparing research in academia and industry and what are the best practices in each of these domains. We will keep the questions at the end of the talk, so feel free to write your questions and keep it for the later. Let's move towards the first chapter, which is academia and industry. So I was actively involved in academic research for my 2 years at Brown by being a member of Cognitive Science and AI Research Lab. Here, our lab focuses on how humans recognize or make sense of this visual world. This is a visual perception lab. Here, we want to understand questions like, how do brain recognize what an object is? Or how do we interpret shapes, colors, and motion so quickly and accurately? To explore these ideas, we use neuroscience and artificial intelligence. We use AI models to test the theories about the human brain, how it processes visual information. We also use brain inspiration. We also take inspiration from brain, that how it handles vision. And we use those inspirations to design computer vision models grounded in those theories. During my time at Brown, I was able to contribute into a core AI research project, which tested 3D perception capability between models and human. This project is called 3D-PC, a benchmark for visual perspective taking in humans and machine. I will talk about this in further detail in the following slide. But before moving forward, I want to give you guys a flavor of one of the aspects of cognitive science research. So let's do some fun experiments. I want you guys to pay really close attention to the following slides. So let's start with the first experiment. So the question is, what did you guys see? Or if you see anything, please answer in chat. Look into the chat if you have anything to say, if anybody observed anything here. A cat. Okay. A cat. Okay, perfect. So most of you guessed it correctly. The object on the screen was indeed a cat. But now I want to give an interesting fact. The object you saw on the screen was only shown for 200 milliseconds. And this is the beauty of visual perception. People can detect or categorize objects and scenes within about 100 to 150 milliseconds with good accuracy. The experiment that I did was inspired by one of the studies from James DiCarlo lab at MIT, evidence that recurrent circuits are critical to ventral visual stream. I know there is a bit of a jargon here, but I'll clarify about it in the further slides. So stay tuned. So here in this research, they asked this critical question: are recurrent circuits actually required to carry out object recognition, or feed-forward processing in enough? So let me share what is a recurrent circuit in human brain. As we see an object in the real world, it passes through a retina, a lateral geniculate nucleus, which is one of the part in brain. Then it further passes through visual cortex, which is V1 area of the brain, then V2, V4, and inferior temporal cortex. Now, all the connections here, the blue one, you can see there is a feed-forward connection, and the decision happens in the inferior temporal cortex. Now you can see there are the red connections from the top, which are the recurrent connections, which kind of connects each module to each other. So this is how recurrent and feed-forward processing in brain is organized. And the below, at the bottom picture that you're seeing is the feed-forward DCNNs. So this research is a beautiful example of how we use artificial neural networks to understand more about brain. So let's look into their experiment a bit in detail, like about what they tried doing. So here they showed many images to primates and the feed-forward DCNNs, which is deep convolution neural networks. Some images were easy for both. They call them as control images. The images which were easy to recognize for humans as well as the feed-forward DCNNs, they call it as control. The challenging images are the images which were easily recognized by the primates, but were misclassified by the machines, which are the feed-forward machines. Now, the hypothesis here is challenge images may require some additional processing other than feed-forward processing. They may require those recurrent circuits. And through analyzing the recordings in the inferior temporal cortex of the monkeys who were shown these images, they found out that the challenge images took additional 30 milliseconds of latency in the object solution time. Now you can imagine OST is object solution time, which shows that at what time the signal in the brain was decodable to recognize an object. So as you can see, the control images were far easily, they were able to decode the object far early than the challenge images, which kind of shows or hints towards a direction of presence of recurrent circuits for robust recognition of the objects. Now, why is this important? Why is this important in neuroscience? Here it provides a strong empirical evidence that thinking of ventral visual stream, which is this area of the brain, as just a feed-forward hierarchy is incomplete. The brain leverages recurrence in rapid object recognition as well. Then why is it important for AI? Now we want models that mimic biological vision. We don't want it to completely mimic the entire biology of the brain, but we want it to perform on as far as how our brain does, how accurate our brain is, or maybe better than how we do it. So likely, it suggests that if we want to get accurate on challenging images, we might need recurrent circuits or very deep architectures, not just shallow feed-forward stacks. So I hope you were able to get a sense of how we used AI in this particular research to understand one interesting capabilities in neuroscience. Let's do another experiment. This is called visual perspective taking. So I have another question for you guys. Given that the teddy bear is looking in this line of direction, can the bear see the cross on the left mountain? Feel free to answer in chat. Okay. I've seen one answer which says, I don't think so. Um, and that is yes. And another answer, no, yes. Okay. That is pretty good. I see that we have a really smart crowd. I wasn't able to do this task. Okay. So let's move back. Yes, you are right. The bear cannot see the left crosshair. Now, let's take it a bit further. Like, why do you think you were able to do this task? Feel free to answer by turning on your mics or answer it in the chat. I want you to think hypothesis that you can derive about why were you able to tell that the bear cannot look at the cross on the left mountain or cannot see the cross at the left mountain. Tall mountain peak. Okay. Okay, that is an interesting hypothesis. Yes. So one interesting point here is, yes, the mountain peak is tall, but you recognize that this cross appears behind the mountain. You somehow have the sense of depth of understanding between where the cross is. There is one interesting hypothesis behind this question. Here, researchers have found that whenever humans are asked to do this task, they take a bit additional latency to kind of infer what's going to happen. And one of the hypotheses is human actually shift their perspective and look from others' point of view. Now, to do this, you need to have that rich representation in 3D space, which will allow you to do that affine transformation in that 3D space. And this was a study that was published in ICLR 2025, where we conducted this visual perspective taking experiment between humans and machines. Now we wanted to do apples to apples comparison. That's why we created our own data set, which looks like this. This is one of the samples from the data set. Here, the green frustum points towards the line of direction or gives a hint or a cue to what direction we need to look into. And the red ball is an object where we ask this question, can this red object be seen from the green frustum's point of view? We conducted these experiments and asked these questions to multiple human subjects, and as well as we evaluated the state-of-the-art computer vision models. So the way we evaluated this computer vision models was through a method called linear probing. It is used quite heavily nowadays, where we want to preserve the internal information about a pre-trained model, and we use that information to do our to train our model to a particular task. So what we do is we freeze architectural weights until the last penultimate layer and add a linear layer on top of it. So the idea is if our model has a good 3D internal representation, then just the linear layer would allow it to do that affine transformation because it's a linear transformation. Now, what we found out that most of the models which shows high accuracy on ImageNet data, ImageNet is a benchmark data set, which used to be considered benchmark for 2D static images, 2D static models. We found out that most of the computer vision models which have high ImageNet accuracy, including diffusion models, vision language models, transformers, we even tested ChatGPT and Claude on this. We found out all of these models were at chance, which is the baseline accuracy of VPT, because it's a binary classification task. Its accuracy is 50%. So that means they were random. So they couldn't understand how to solve this VPT task given their internal representations. Whereas humans, as you can see, their VPT accuracy is more than 80%. So this is still an open challenge. Last I checked, this is an interesting challenge where we want the computer vision models to have a good sense of 3D perception to solve this, or rich enough representations to solve this VPT task. Now, all that I have discussed is about the core aspect of cognitive science research or computer vision research. And here are some very interesting papers that were published from the lab. If you're interested in any of this cognitive science area or visual perception, I would recommend you to do check out our lab website. If you find any of the project interesting, you can reach out to the peers in the lab as well, or the folks in the lab. Now, this was one aspect of AI research in academia, which is a core AI research. Now, one important advice that I received from my PI while my time at Brown, with my principal investigator or the professor while my time at Brown, was always have some filler projects on the side. Now, I would like to create my own version of it, which is a slightly different version, which is always have an applied project running alongside your main research. Now, you might ask, why is applied project even necessary? Like, I'm already involved in a main project, like, and that is of greater interest to me. But here is the thing: these main research projects or long-term research projects, they move slowly and has a lot of uncertainty. Whereas applied projects will help you show some measurable impact. And trust me, in all of the interviews that I've given during my uh, when I was trying to look for new job opportunities as a machine learning engineer, I only talked about my applied research project because they show some concrete results and they test your ability to how you think practically while solving a problem. Can you tackle different hurdles during your problem solving? And can you ship a project? Can you debug edge cases? So this were the talk of my interviews. These projects were the talk of my interviews. Finally, applied projects make you stand out in the industry because they are looking for candidates who have shipped something. So do tend to involve yourself in the applied project because those are very beneficial. Here's my applied project that I did at Brown, which is decoding fossils. The purpose of the purpose of walking you guys through this project is I want you to understand how different hurdles appear in the applied project and how you can maneuver through it, and that kind of makes you better at being hands-on on any of the other projects as well. It helps you develop expertise in different tools, and more than that, it helps you know about your machine learning architectures in much detail. So at Brown, I was involved in this applied project called Decoding Fossil Leaves with Artificial Intelligence. This project was in collaboration between Brown, Penn State, and National Park Service, and Herbert Mayer from National Park Service, Colorado, USA. So here, uh, the task for us was that we were given this data set which had leaf and fossils. So right now what you're seeing is a particular class. When I say a class, it's a category, a leaf sample from that category and a fossil sample from that category. And the task is we want to learn from this data set and build a computer vision model that when tested in the wild will be able to recognize the leaf fossils into the correct families or classes. This project has a very high importance in paleobotany because when the paleobotanists find the fossil samples in the wild, it is really difficult for them to understand what family it belongs to. So having a tool which helps them do that or give a good educated guess to do that, it is of a very high importance. And that's why this research is right now in the documentation stage. It is in the final stage and is considered for submission in Nature Journal. So let's look into the hurdles that appear. I'll just walk you guys briefly on what were the hurdles that we saw in this particular project. As you can see, in this particular leaf sample, since these specimens are pretty rare, so they are preserved in laboratory. So while the way they are preserved is like they add the category name in the specimen as well. So the samples that we received had the category name present. Now, if you pass this data set directly to a machine learning model, since this is also a pattern, it can just look at this pattern and answer what particular class it is. And this is a classic problem in the computer vision or in AI domain. If there is a shortcut to do a task, your machine learning model will probably opt for that because it is more efficient. So we had to kind of remove all those shortcuts or noises using a segmentation map where we train the model with only the segmentation map showing the leaves. A second hurdle was, as you can see, a leaf can have like small scale patterns. And these patterns are very important to identify what category or what family the leaf belongs to. Third, there were very less fossil images for some classes. Now, how are we able to classify the leaf fossils if we have no data? So all these hurdles were pretty important and very crucial to overcome to develop a system which is highly accurate. So as I've already mentioned, we tried a segmentation approach to avoid noise. So as you can see, the baseline model, which was trained directly with the entire input data, was only looking at this particular name. The green color or the yellowish color that you're seeing is the attribution map or importance map of the particular model. So here, what it's trying to say is this particular model was looking into the leaf name for classifying the object. But when we added the segmentation map, only passing the leaf cutout and nothing else, we saw that the model was correctly able to classify the leaf by looking at the leaf. Second, to overcome the scales issue, the small scale issue or small scale or large scale feature issue, we passed different crops of the image into our machine learning model so that the model could zoom in and see what are the scale pattern or the small scale patterns. Finally, to overcome the problem of low fossils images, we trained a stable diffusion model to generate synthetic fossils. And each of this improvement led to a significant amount of boost in the accuracy. And finally, one thing that we found out that our model representations weren't that good enough. What I mean by that? So when you check the penultimate layer of the model, computer vision model, and check its representation, we found out that the leaf and fossils from the same family, here the color represents the class, the leaf and fossils from the same family in a lower dimension. So when you take that entire representation, you kind of decompose it into smaller dimensions, which using UMAP, it shows that the samples were far apart from the same family. And ideally, we don't want this. We want the leaf and the fossils from the same family to be closer together in our model's internal representation. And when we enforced a contrastive loss or a self-supervised loss in this, we saw that the representations actually converged to a similar point. And this led to a significant boost in the accuracy of our model. So the purpose of this slides or presentation or this particular part of the talk was to show that how when you do an applied project, there are several difficulties that will occur and you'll have to overcome it. And during that, you will learn how like you will have hands-on experience to work with real-world data. You learn to use different state-of-the-art methods. Because in applied projects, there are so many other researches and publications which are already out there. You have to create novelty through your approaches or through your performance. And to do that, you will try to find best possible solution for your models. And that is majority of the industry as well. You're tackling a use case to find the best possible solution, but there is an additional problem or additional limitation in the industry, which I'll talk about it in later slides or future slides. Third thing I understand, or the benefits of applied project is it gives you a deeper understanding of your model. So while doing this research, as you can see, we found out there are different hurdles. We need to pass low scale images, low scale patterns, because the convolution network with a small or even large filter size is not able to recognize it. So all these things you will develop when you get yourself involved in an applied project and try to make a meaningful contribution. Finally, before wrapping up the research part of the talk, I want to share some of the key takeaways that helped me during my research. And if you are early in your career, starting your research, this will help you a lot as well. Please have your abstract ready. I cannot emphasize this enough. Before even starting to work on an idea or implementing or doing toy experiments and testing your hypothesis, please have your abstract ready. When you have your abstract ready, you understand what you want to do in this research and what is this research delivering, what value it's bringing. This is one of the important advice that I received from my PI and I do tend to follow. And to some extent, this also holds true in the industry, which we'll see later in the future slides when I talk about research in industry. One thing I would suggest, please do attend the invited talks. This were really helpful for me. I was able to understand what are the state of the art research that are happening. These talks are really informative and you develop a sense of understanding with the topic that you're involved in or with the research that you're involved in when you understand different perspectives. One thing I would like to say, by joining the industry, I have found out that the majority of the code base between ML pipeline and what you do during your research is not that different if you optimize your code. I would say, please do read the state-of-the-art research repositories. This will help you optimize your code. And if there is a chance where you are doing an experiment and your code is too slow, please optimize it. It will not just help you now, but in the industry, we do care about writing optimized code in every possible way. Last advice I would like to say is please ask why until you understand why you're doing an experiment. If you don't understand the why behind it, you're probably not doing the right experiment and you'll have to redo it. I cannot emphasize more enough. These are the learnings that I have gathered during my research, and I believe if I would knew this a bit earlier. Finally, the most interesting part of the talk is what helped me from my research to crack and roll as an MLE in the industry. So I will not talk about having X number of citations or having good user profile, or sorry, Google profile or Google Scholar profile would help. Definitely that those are the factors. But here I'm trying to share what are the practices that I did during my research. Those helped me in ML interviews. Before moving towards that, let's do a brief understanding about. I'll share about what are the common formats of ML interview from my experience by interviewing in big tech as well as startups. The first thing for the first particular round is online assessment. This will be like a take-home assessment where you'll be asked lead code style question. The number of problems may range from 2 to 4 numbers. That's what I've seen so far. So this will be an online assessment. The second round is a technical coding round. Now, depending on the role, if you are applying for machine learning engineer, then you'll be asked probably a lead code style problem. But if it's an applied scientist or applied researcher role, then you might be asked a DL heavy coding problem. So what does that mean? Which is deep learning coding problem. You might be asked to create an architecture or write a backward pass for any particular algorithm or model. Second round is pretty similar to round one, which is a technical coding round. Here, I don't think that second round is a bit difficult or it's similar. It is on the same level, but it's just another round. And in big tech firms, this is often called as a interview loop, where you have back-to-back interviews. For MLE, there are additional ML concept rounds here where they are trying to test your theory, understanding of how practices in machine learning work, what are the different concepts, what are the things about data that you should know. And this round is particularly done in like a mix of system design style questions as well. And if you're applying as an applied researcher or research scientist role, you might be asked to perform a presentation to give a talk about your research journey and what are the contribution you have made in the field. Finally, if you are applying for a senior role, that's what I've got to know from my alumni, that if you're applying for a senior role, then you might be asked a separate system design round where they are trying to understand if you understand the real-time production ML systems. Now let's move on to what helped from research that maybe you guys can also get benefited with. First is like reading papers. This goes without saying that during research, if you are working in the core area or rather even applied projects, you'll be reading a lot of papers. But this really built my comfort with mathematical concepts like probability, stats. What are the evaluation metrics that are used in recent days? Nowadays, what are the evaluation metrics you use for when the data is imbalanced? What all metrics are important? And also, this really helped me keep in the loop with the new algorithms. Reading the code bases, it really got me into habit of reading state of the art implementations. So whenever you're trying to implement a research, you will probably go to their code base and go through it. This is really helpful because those state of the art code repos or repositories do follow the industry standard. These are the people who work in industry or who are working as a staff or MLEs in industry or research engineers. So they do follow the same pattern. So I would recommend, please read those code bases. Those are very helpful. One important skill that I learned during my research is distributed training of deep learning model. This again goes without saying that this has become one of the major expertise as an MLE in the industry. You should know about how to train your model in a distributed fashion. Here I've mentioned these two approaches, which is distributed data parallel and data parallel in PyTorch. But the reason I have mentioned this is not to kind of highlight these two approaches, but I want you to understand what's the difference. So whenever you will opt for a particular approach of distributed training, please do try understanding what is the benefit of that approach, or if there is an alternate method that you could use. One thing I would like to say, please master a deep learning library. Either it could be PyTorch, it could be TensorFlow. Please do master it. Try to understand what each function parameter is doing, because this is very important. And probably when you read those state-of-the-art code bases, they will use a lot of these functions. Personally, in the interviews, I was asked about register parameter and register buffer, and why are they used and what are their uses. I was also asked about what is lost or detached to, and also asked about custom data loaders. Then you can understand why this is so important. So please do understand each of these functions and parameters in the deep learning library. It will be really, this is something, this fifth point is not something that I did during my research. I did this as a machine learning interview prep, but this has been very crucial for my interviews. Please train your own models. Please create your own models from scratch. Personally, in the interview, I was asked about coding a transformer from scratch using a single head attention and followed by a multi head attention question. I was also asked about writing a batch norm from scratch, both its forward and backward implementation. So, how would this help? When you will create your own modules in either PyTorch or TensorFlow, you will be following their structural patterns, and that is a really good way to code in the interviews as well because it makes things super clear. So those are the important advice which I personally found helpful during my ML interview, and I hope you would find the same as well. Now that I have covered the first two chapters, which is research in academia and what helped from my research for the ML interviews, I'll quickly go over through the research and industry part. Now we are in the final chapter of the presentation where I'll be sharing my perspective about what are the core avenues of the research. We'll also talk about my work at RT and my learnings from the industry. And finally, I will conclude by showing a comparison between research and industry. We'll majorly talk about ML in production in this particular aspect in of the presentation. So the avenues of research. So what I've observed is like there is one aspect which is a core AI research, which is similar for academia as well, where you develop fundamental algorithms, models, and infrastructures. This field is like majorly dominated by big tech firms and frontier labs nowadays as well. Nowadays, there is another aspect which is applied AI research, which focuses on using the established methods to solve their own domain-specific problems. And this is quite well distributed. Majority of the MLEs will be working in those applied research areas, where it because this is widely spread between big tech, where they develop internal toolings in using applied research, in mid-sized companies and early stage startups, where they're trying to solve a problem. Now that you are aware about the core avenues of research, I want to quickly introduce Archie, because to understand my role as an MLE of Archie, it is really important to understand what Archie do as a company and what is their product. So Archie is a leading demand side platform which serves ads to millions of users on a daily basis. So to understand what Archie does, let's go through the AdTech ecosystem. So there are three major components here, which is a supply side platform, an ad exchange, and a DSP. So each of these three components play a crucial role. Let's try to understand from two important aspects in AdTech ecosystem, which is ad request and ad response. So what happens here? So just stay tuned in. Like if you see for the next two slides, if you understand this, it will be pretty clear what as a role of MLE would be in the AdTech industry. Or in general, what as a role of MLE will be in the industry where there is data on a very large scale. So let's say you or me as a user, we went onto a particular app. That app will be called a publisher. If the app serves ads to you, then the app would the app will send a request to supply side platform that I have this user coming on my platform and I want to show it an ad. This SSP, supply side platform, shares this request to Ad Exchange, which acts as a mediator. Ad Exchange then broadcasts this request to multiple DSPs, and Archie is one of these DSP. Now, as a DSP, we are tasked to analyze those requests and then use our recommendation models to prioritize the inventory for our clients. Now, our clients are these advertisers, which come onto our platform and say, we want to serve ads to these users to bring those users on our platform. So what we do is use a recommendation model. And if we find out the request that has come from a particular user or publisher, if that user is useful for our client, we place a bid price to Ad Exchange. We send that bit price to ad exchange. Similarly, there will be a lot other DSP which will put a bit price if they find that user helpful. So a lot of bid prices are sent to ad exchange, which leads to an auction. And whoever bids higher, that particular user's ad is served to that publisher, and that user sees that ad. And if the user looked into the ad, and if the user make a purchase in our client's app, that's how we get attributed or we get benefited. So as an RT, as a company, we serve this millions of bid requests. Now you can imagine, since we receive this millions of bid requests, how much lower the latency of our model should be. Here, we want our models to serve less than 50 milliseconds per bid request. So these are very shallow models that we use. So now that you know about what is the requirement of the platform, I will quickly talk about my roles as a machine learning engineer. So as you all know that I joined Arki as a full-time machine learning engineer in their core ML team in 2025. But before that, I joined as an intern to work on a diffusion models research project. It was to generate or enhance the existing creative assets. These are basically the ads that you see on your mobile phones. Using diffusion models, we were supposed to enhance this using stable diffusion. After successfully delivering that project, I got an opportunity to work in their full-time core ML team. Here, my day-to-day jobs are performance optimization of our existing models towards the KPI. Now, this is one of the interesting aspects of the industry, that your model accuracy matters to some extent. But if your model accuracy is not leading to business KPIs, then that model is of no use for your company. So you have to keep in mind how to associate your model accuracy towards the business KPI. That is one of the important job as a machine learning engineer. Second, optimizing SQL queries. Since you have already mentioned the scale of the product, here we receive millions of bid requests. So when we will train those models on those bid requests, we have to make sure that everything is efficient and organized. So the SQL queries have to be optimized, because we train our models on multiple days, and that could lead to billions of records in training. So you can imagine here we use data infrastructures like Hadoop and Spark. So one thing I would like to highlight, it is very important for you to know this distributed data frameworks. Other things that I do in my day-to-day work is creating new features in our existing data orchestration pipeline, which I'll talk about it. This is one of the beautiful aspects of working as a machine learning engineer in the industry. Second, creating new models. If you find out that maybe this model is not performing good, there is something else required, then you build a client-specific models as well. Now, creating those new models and ensuring that those models are trained distributedly to have a faster, to have a faster throughput. So hurdles and learnings that I've gathered. One thing I would like to share is now that you know my role and what I've been doing, I would like to share the hurdles that have occurred in my role at Arki and the learnings that I've gathered by working as an MLA in the industry. The project moves super fast. You will wear different hats at once in a startup. It is very important to adapt and move on to the next task. The projects, the speed, the purpose, the culture of every organization will be different, but it's very important to understand the tech fundamentals remain the same. Most of these companies do follow big tech patterns. They do follow whatever infrastructure the big tech is building, that becomes a new industry standard. So on a very high level, the infrastructure fundamentals also remain the same. It might happen that your company uses different stack to do the distributed ML pipeline. So instead of for data orchestration, your company might use Prefect, Airflow. These are all data orchestration tools, which makes the continuous CI/CD integration faster. I'll talk about this in the next slide. But infrastructure and pipelines remain the same. Now, I found this really interesting blog post from Google Cloud, which talks about continuous integration, deployment, and continuous training pipeline. I will talk about each of these components on a very brief level, but by giving an example so that it becomes very clear to you guys. But one thing I would want to make sure that all other sideline things or all other things at the corner or the edges of this box are required for scaling. But the measure or the core of this box is still your training, data validation, and model training and evaluation pipeline. So this data extraction, validation, preparation is super important. The fundamentals from the research still remains the same. You need to understand the problem in detail, right from the data, then build effective solution at the top. And rest other things are about making sure that nothing breaks in production. So let's understand how ML pipeline in production would look like. So in the initial stage, which is called a data orchestration, let's say you or me as a data scientist, we train a new model and tries our idea locally on a, let's say, Jupyter notebook, or locally in a script or a branch in or different branch in our code repo. When we find out that this particular model is delivering really good value in offline results, we push that branch we merge that branch into the main code base or source code. Once the continuous integration pipeline verifies that there are no major bugs or nothing else in the existing code repository is breaking, it does the continuous deployment of that particular code. Your particular model now is ready to serve or ready to be trained in a production pipeline. Now, this particular production pipeline, it could be a data orchestration pipeline like Prefect, Airflow. Whenever you want this model to go in production, you start training this model or you train this model on a regular basis. So using that Prefect flow pipeline, those code changes are present in the production. That Prefect flow pipeline picks those code changes, train the model, and once it's verified that the model is showing some good performance, that model is updated in this model registry. Now this could be S3 bucket, which a cloud bucket where you push your models. Now once the model is in registry, it is ready for serving into the production. And once the model is served in the production, the tracking becomes really important, which is the next stage. Now, all these production ready things are built for a specific reason. It's that this real world machine learning products have a very high scale. And whenever you have very high scale, there are several things that could go wrong. First is there could be a data distribution shift. Now, because the data in the real world shifts faster, you might need to retrain your model. That's why all these things needs to be in place so that you can just put one go and these models are ready to be trained. So this performance monitoring, it could be based on your data drift or your model performance might be going low. Based on that, you will trigger a new experiment or a new run for your model so that your model gets used to the new data that it's seeing. And this new model is trained and this particular pipeline is repeated again and again. So this is a classical ML pipeline. This is basically the basics. There will be different tools used in different companies, but the core idea will remain the same always. There are several ways in industry you serve machine learning products. This goes from you serve your ML tools from cloud to serving ML in your own databases or using Spark or Hadoop as in big data systems. So let's say when you're doing your product on a small scale or as a POC, you can train your product entirely on cloud, which is super easy to do. Sometimes because of the latency reasons or maybe your data set size, your company infrastructure will have their own databases and you might have to train your model in those databases systems like in R language as in capital letter R language. And by doing that, you save the latency. So you have, as a machine learning engineer, you have to kind of understand what is your company infrastructure and take a call on what particular tool or technology can be used. I believe this is one of the important or very critical aspect of a machine learning engineer, that to understand the data and then deciding the compute that you require. One thing I would like to highlight, as if you start as an early career machine learning engineer, all the CI/CD pipeline will be in place. But as a MLE or as a new grad, your job is to kind of quickly understand how these pipelines are arranged in your company. And and if you have a good base of how a model is trained, things will be a lot. You'll definitely have a head start. I cannot emphasize enough. One of my learnings is please think about scale and latency of your product. If you build a stellar solution which is not meeting the latency standards, it is of no use. It is really important to understand the latency of the product. So even before you start anything, create anything, please make a plan. Keep transparency in your approach. If a particular task is assigned to you, please clarify the requirements, understand what the deliverables are, and then create a plan and get the feedback early and then start implementing. So as you can see, this is similar to having your abstract ready. If you get used to the habit of first having an abstract ready, this will be really helpful for you in the industry as well. And to be honest, don't commit a deadline if you don't understand a problem, because in industry the deadlines are considered very severely, or they are at most they are at very important. Finally, to summarize this entire presentation, I would like to mention the best practices and the key takeaways. So what I've observed that in academia and industry, academia is majorly novelty driven, where you can build novelty through data set, methods, benchmark, or survey papers. Whereas in industry, you have to improve the existing systems in one way or the another by reducing the latency, throughput, or by bringing more business using your models. Previously, I mentioned that academia gives you an ability to create complex or use complex approaches, but in industry, there is one constraint, which is the latency. You cannot try all the approaches that you want to if you see that a particular approach has a very high latency and it's not required for your problem, or is not required for your product, then you cannot use that approach. Academia has longer timelines. Here the publication cycles are pretty important, whereas in industry there is a culture of try fast. uh, it's okay if you fail, but then repeat, learn, and then repeat. It's very important that you understand this particular approach from the industry, that you have to quickly iterate on a problem. Finally, I would like to mention that the success is measured by novelty and majority of your contribution in the field through papers. Here, the success is measured by the KPI, or how reliable system you're building. To summarize, uh, that's here's what I find, what are the best practices as a researcher you could do. As I've already mentioned, have your abstract ready, be rigorous with your experiments, always try optimizing your code. If there is any chance in your research, I know it's not bringing much value to your research, but if you can optimize your code, that will really help you in the industry as well, as an MLE, and this is for sure, this will help you. Get yourself involved in an applied project. From my journey, I have tried expressing that applied projects are very important, and they are in the similar power to the core projects. If you do an applied project, it will build your understanding on another level, and this will help you scale up a lot. One thing I would like to mention in research is, like, a lot of experiment will fail, but don't get discouraged and keep trying. Similar holds true for industry as well, but here there are a few additional parts, which is always think about scale and production. Please explain to yourself why you're using this particular resource. If you explain the use of every single resource, you will develop an optimized solution. In industry, ownership is very important. Here you have to take efforts and reach out to folks to understand what is the problem that you're assigned and how you should approach to it. If you keep quiet and keep working on the problem, nobody's going to come and tell you what you're supposed to do. So you have to take ownership of that problem and understand it from other folks. Sometimes in industry, what I've observed is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is already an existing solution out there, and which is probably simpler, and it will lead a good outcome for your product. So if you have any ambitious research in your mind, please do it on the side, but always have some quick solutions as well. Finally, I would like to mention that what I've observed is coding standard are pretty higher, and that is one of the practices industry follows, to have a high coding standards. So again, I would recommend, if you're doing research, do read those code repositories from the state of the art research papers. Those folks are already working in the industry, and they know what are the production ready codes, how the ready codes are written. By saying that, I would like to conclude this presentation, and I would like to thank the Courier community for giving me this opportunity to share my findings from both research and academia. Now, I can take any further questions as well from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gaurav. This was such an amazing presentation. You've covered so much in the span of like 45 to 50 minutes. Really glad to see so many important takeaways from this. So I'll get started with the question and answers. Earlier in the session, Nazia asked, is the interview format same for grad internships as well?
So one thing, grad internship in the sense PhD internships, or so I'll answer for both. So if you are
Mhm.
asking as a graduate student in PhD, then the format might be a bit different in terms of the questions asked. So here you might be asked DL heavy questions. So yeah, the format overall will remain the same, but the style of the questions might be different.
Okay, that's great. Then in our Q&A section, we have an anonymous person asking, what mistakes do you expect beginners to make when setting up distributed runs? And do you recommend any tools or libraries to learn this?
That's actually a really good question. Um, from my personal experience, while creating distributed runs, most of your initial experiments will fail, like the model running runs will fail. And now using the tools like LLMs and GPTs, you will be able to quickly figure that out, like what particular aspect of your code is failing. I would say it is very important to not get a successful output, but you need to understand the pipeline at its core, like what that function is doing. So I think just getting the output, you might think that you know distributed training, but in the hindsight, it might not be very clear to you. So hands-on experience is definitely, it will be really good to have a good hands-on experience, but understanding will help you go further. That is one of the aspect that I would like to share. Tools and techniques, I would say read the code bases. PyTorch has really good documentations on how to train in a distributed fashion. So please go through it. That will be really helpful.
Great, wonderful. Um, then if anyone else has any other questions, you may drop it in the chat now. But yeah, we have a question. As a first year student, I'm assuming, how do you make good applied AI projects?
So I would say collaboration is one of the keys. Do collaborate with multiple folks if you can on any applied project. This will help you understand what all things they have explored and what are the state of the art methods as well. If you collaborate with people, it really helps in this case. Yeah.
Great. Um, any more questions?
Also, one
Okay.
thing I'd like to add is like when you're doing applied projects, it is really important to do a good literature survey as a starting point.
Mhm.
Because here you're trying to find novelty, as I already mentioned. Here you're trying to find novelty through your performance or through your approach. It is good to know what are the contemporary solutions out there.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I have a question. So basically, from what I've learned in my brief period of working in the industry, context switching is a really hard but really important task, especially when it comes to tight deadlines, as you said, like meeting business KPIs. So, do you have any tips for managing, context switching? How do you manage your time? And essentially, like your brain capacity in terms of handling multiple things at once.
Um, I think this is really helpful. This is really useful if you are able to manage your context switching pretty well in industry as well as in academia. The way I have found my way through it is like first thing in the morning that I do is like write the to-dos. I know it sounds a bit like it's a bit like textbook solution, but I believe this helps a lot. Just write your to-dos that you're supposed to do after your stand-up call or else after your research meeting as well. Write your to-dos for every single day on each day at the morning and just try to tick mark or check mark all the to-dos. This will help you kind of understand, okay, I've done this task now and like I have to move towards the next one. Otherwise, I won't be completing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to start doing that. I'm not good with to-dos. So
To-dos
I
really help.
need to, yeah. Yeah, I need to adopt it. We have another question from Arya. Are there any good resources out there for learning system design when it comes to machine learning? Do you have any recommendations?
For the like currently or right now, I don't have those resources with me, but there are definitely a ton of material out there. Even
Mhm,
if you ask an LLM tool about what are the top resources, you will easily find those. But yeah,
mhm,
that's there are a lot of resources out there. I would recommend do understanding or doing the case studies for particular companies. Let's say you pick a company which serves data or serves users on a very large scale. Just do a case study of that company, and that will help you understand a lot more how the system design works. There are a lot of YouTube videos which I personally found, and there are some GitHub repositories as well, which shows system design questions that are often asked in industry.
Great. We have another person who asks, how do you make applied projects that are impactful?
Yeah. This is an interesting question. Um, the thing, because there are so many research already going on right now. There is so much research already going on right now that even if you come up with an approach, it might happen that it's already implemented, right? But then you can start thinking about, okay, this particular approach has been implemented. Is there anything I could build on top of it? Again, having a thorough literature or doing a thorough literature survey will help you do that. I see that one of the person in the chat has shared a resource for system design. I also agree that this is an important resource. But coming back, um, having doing a detailed literature survey is very important. And first understanding what novelty you're bringing, and then moving towards the project. I know it sounds simple, but it is not actually when you do in practice. But I think this is the current state of the research right now. If you want to make meaningful impact, just make sure that you have your novelty in your head, like what novelty you're creating, and you have done the contemporary research.
Yeah, yeah, I agree too. And sometimes it's not really about, when you're just starting out. Let's say, I'm assuming there are a lot of students in this audience right now. So even as you're starting out, just getting used to like literature survey, doing the whole process, right? It can be tedious. It can be really hard to get used to. But once you do it a couple of times, once you pick out a project and go through the process, it will really help out. So I hope, do you agree with me, Gaurav? Or
Definitely, definitely. Once you get into the habit of reading papers, reading the 10th paper would be really easy for you, I would say. You would know what all the things you need to look into a paper. You'll directly jump into the algorithm. You would understand what are the authors trying to convey. So yes, definitely.
yeah. We have, yeah, we are almost done with our session, but we can go for like 2 more minutes if anyone else has any questions. We can wait, no worries. All right, then, I guess we can conclude our session. Gaurav, this was an amazing 1 hour of lots of information, lots of useful tips and tricks to take away, regardless of who you are, whether you're a student, researcher, already an industry expert. I feel like there's a lot of good takeaways over here. I found it helpful very much as a newbie in the industry, and like looking forward to going back into the masters and academia side. I found a lot of like informative tips. So thank you so much. And the audience agrees with me over here. There were so many comments telling how it was helpful and how well you have explained everything. So Gaurav, it was such a pleasure having you, and it was my pleasure to host you today. Thank you so much to the audience as well. Thank you for sticking around. Hope you have gained a lot, as much as I did. And yeah, hope you all have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you so much for joining the session.